Good evening and welcome to Conversations with the Candidates on Houston Media Source Television, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of the Houston Area Education Fund. We're glad to have you along with us tonight. I'm Tim Langford, and along with me is my co-host, Nyla Shepard. And this evening we are going to learn a little bit more about the candidates running for the County Treasurer office, Orlando Sanchez and Dylan Osborne, and so that you can make an informed decision about who to elect on November 6th. This half hour, we are welcoming Orlando Sanchez. He's the current treasurer here in Harris County. He's running for re-election for a 5th term. And we really do appreciate you joining us this evening.
Thank you, Tim. Good to be here.
You've been Harris County Treasurer since 2006. Tell us a little bit more about you and why voters should elect you for another term.
Yeah, so I'm a native of Havana, Cuba. I immigrated to Houston in May of 1962. My father was hired as the first Spanish broadcaster for the Colt 45s, who became the Houston Astros. They never won a pennant, by the way, as long as he's working with them, but I'm sure he's looking down on us, very happy for the Astros. I'm a graduate of Bel Air High School. I went and served in the United States Air Force and served 6 years with the Texas Air National Guard at Ellington Field. I'm a graduate of the University of Houston with honors in BA, and I started law school, but I withdrew and I ran for the Texas legislature in 1992, was defeated, but stayed active in the community and ultimately was elected citywide in 1995 to a city council position. In 2001 and 2003, I ran for mayor of Houston, defeated both times, but the 2001 race is still the most historic race in the history of Houston, because it was the highest voter turnout. And as you mentioned, 12 years ago I was elected as the county treasurer, countywide. It is a fiduciary office. We are answer to the Commissioner's Court. We basically are the local little bank for the county. All deposits, all disbursements, all accounting of the money is reported to the Commissioner's Court. It is constitutionally mandated by the state of Texas and the Texas Constitution. Every county in Texas, with the exception of 4, has county treasurers. And we're in the process of modernizing the office. In fact, we're about to spend $30 to $40 million of taxpayer money to bring in an Oracle system, a new accounting system, which will get rid of the old accounting system we've had for decades, thank God. And I'm on the executive committee that oversees that. Since my election, I've brought transparency to the office. We've won national awards for transparency. We receive an award from the state comptroller every year for transparency. I put the entire county checkbook online that is searchable by the taxpayers. I've called out when Harris County has made some financial mistakes. I've warned the public. I put all of my audits online. I'm proud to say that we've always had clean audits. By the way, for 12 years, my county budget for my office has been static. I've never had a substantial budget increase in 12 years.
Wonderful. Natalie, do you have a question?
I have a question. You mentioned your Latino heritage, and I read that you're the first Latino to be elected to a citywide position in Houston. What does that mean to you when you're speaking to minorities out here right now during this election season?
Well, first of all, I'm not the first Latino. I'm the first immigrant, I think, elected to the Houston City Council and countywide. It's a great source of pride to be able to be an immigrant to this country,
right,
and be able to hold elective office in the 4th largest city in the nation and then in the 3rd largest county in the nation. And it just demonstrates how welcoming Houston and Harris County are, that everybody's got a shot. It doesn't matter where you're from, what color your skin is, what your orientation is. If you have good ideas and you go out and work hard and campaign, the community responds and elects you. And so that's probably the greatest honor I think I could have ever received.
All right. So voters recently approved a $2.5 billion bond package to work on some flooding-related issues that Harris County is well known for. What will your office do to ensure that those funds are spent wisely?
Well, our office is for accountability. So every time we issue debt, which the voters approved a overall package of $2.5 billion, which will be matched by some federal money. So potentially we could have an infusion of about $5 billion into the coffers of Harris County. My job is to account for that money and then disperse it as the contractors are performing on their contracts based upon approval of the Commissioner's Court. So my job is strictly oversight and obviously to make sure that that money is spent for flood control. Not that it's used for roads and not that it's used for police cars and not that it's used for some extraordinary project that a commissioner may want. The voters approved that for flood control, and that's what we're going to do in Harris County.
Okay. Nyla?
I'm curious to know why, as a voter, why would we want to reelect you as opposed to your counterpart?
Well, that's a great question, and I think that the value I bring to the table and to the voters is having an intimate knowledge of regional finance. Remember, I was elected to the Houston City Council in 1995, so I worked on 6 budgets for the city of Houston. So I have financial expertise not only from the city, but also after 12 years understand the Harris County financial operations. There's a big difference, as you may know, between the City of Houston finances and Harris County finances. The City of Houston, unfortunately, is in financial dire straits. They owe lots of money, billions of dollars, to the pensions, police officers, firefighters, municipal employees, and they're having a tough time. They're having to go back to the voters now on rebuild Houston or renew Houston because the ballot language, the court said, was a bit disingenuous. Harris County, on the other side, is in the black. We don't have the financial difficulties. We don't owe any pension monies, and we operate without borrowing a lot of money. In fact, 2 years ago, Harris County quit doing what's called tax anticipation notes. And tax anticipation notes are a short-term borrowing mechanism because we receive all of our revenue in the county around the beginning of the first quarter of a calendar year. That's when everybody pays their property taxes. See, the city of Houston has 2 streams of revenue: property taxes and sales taxes. Harris County only has 1, property taxes. So when times were tough, we used to have to go borrow money to make up at the end of the year. We ran out of cash. And that, of course, is the cost to the taxpayers. Now, we don't do tax anticipation notes. So, and in addition to that, I've been on the board of directors of a bank for 10 years, and I'm also a licensed real estate agent in Texas. So I have a pretty good feel for the Texas economy, for financial operations, what the city needs, what the county needs.
Thank you.
You mentioned this earlier that you said over the last 12 years, and I went and looked up the information as well, that you managed to keep kind of a lid on the expenditures of your office or on the budget. Why was that important from a fiduciary standpoint?
Because I think that when voters elect a person to oversee the finances and the checkbook, so to speak, of the county, they need to know that they're electing somebody that is fiscally prudent. They don't want somebody who's out trying to grab money here and grab money there and grow budgets and expand the office. So when I first was elected county treasurer, we had 18 employees in the office. Today we're down to 12, but we're more efficient. And one of the pledges I made was not to go to the taxpayers and ask for additional money as long as I could operate with transparency, with efficiency, with the same budget I had 12 years ago. So I've been able to hold the line, and it's important because people need to know I campaign as a fiscal conservative, and people need to know that I, in fact, am a fiscal conservative.
One of the things I noticed when I was reviewing the website was what you had mentioned, that you also show the budgets and you show all of that information, which is extremely important. Was that information available prior to you coming and becoming the treasurer, or is that something that you decided that you thought was important to have more visibility for people to know what's going on?
Yeah, so 12 years ago, I started looking at the Office of County Treasurer, and they did not have a website. There was no transparency. If you wanted to find out where a check for $1 million went, you had to do what was called an open records request, and of course, that took a long time. And I thought that people deserve to know where their money's going. And then you couldn't find county budgets anywhere. You couldn't find the Port of Houston. I also run the checkbook for the Port of Houston, the Harris County Toll Road Authority, the Harris County. And so none of those budgets were online. And to me, it was a travesty that given the digital age, with so much easy communication and easy access to data, that we didn't have that information online. So I pledged to put the checkbook online. So now you can search the checkbook almost immediately. You want to find out the Metro budget, you go to my office. You want to know the Harris County Port Authority budget, you go online. You want to know the Sports Authority budget, you go online. The hospital district, you go online. All that information, because at the end of the day, it's your money.
Right.
And you deserve to know where it's going and how it's being spent and how it's being budgeted.
Okay. I have a question about the civil rights lawsuit that was brought against the county, that and how it may affect your position and how it may affect revenue. You also sit on the bail bond board. Last year, this county lost a civil rights lawsuit, saying, and basically under the judge's ruling, most misdemeanor or some misdemeanor defendants are released without bail. Were there any adjustments that were needed to be made in that department, in the criminal justice department, that were affected by the loss of that bond revenue, bail bond revenue?
You know, while I sit on the bail bond board, so in Texas, the statutes allow a county to have a bail bond board to oversee the bail bond industry or not. We are a bail bond board county. And so we have to follow two sets of rules. One are the state statutes with respect to bail bond industry, and the other one is the local code, is included in the local code. And we also have local rules on how we regulate the bail bond industry. The lawsuit had really nothing to do with the bail bond board. Our job is to review and approve applications of new entries into the bail bond industry, and to renew licenses, and to also potentially sanction or terminate or suspend licenses based on violations of the statute or the local rules. But the lawsuit has been expensive. The county did not prevail in the first round, although it's still on appeal, and so they're still tweaking the judge's ruling. The Fifth Circuit sent it back to the district court, and that's where it is. So it really had no effect on how we grant licenses and renew licenses.
I guess my overall question was, just from your experience on the bail bond board, but how will the bond money that was coming in, the bail bonds money that was coming in to get somebody out of jail, how will the loss of that revenue for some of these cases, how will that affect county?
Yeah, well, that's not revenue, unless there's a forfeiture. So when a person is arrested, and let's say the judge imposes a $10,000 bond, a person may go to a bail bondsman and apply, and so they put up assets. Let's just say they have to put up $1,000. The bail bondsman puts up $9,000. That's sort of a guarantee to the judge in the criminal justice system that, yes, I'll show up on the hearing date. Now, if that person doesn't show up, they forfeit that money. The bail bondsman is out $9,000 and the defendant's out $1,000. But in the past, that's guaranteed generally that people showed up. Otherwise, you get a bounty hunter after you. Now, on the misdemeanor cases, the lawsuit, as I understand, was saying that, look, there are a lot of people that are indigent, and they're having to sit in jail for 3 or 4 or 5, sometimes 10 days, because they can't post a bond. I mean, it's a minor case. So they're giving these people what's called personal recognizance bonds. Someone who makes an evaluation and a recommendation to the court, and so they're out on PR bonds. And but there's no revenue. The county does not make money. It's not a revenue generator. The bail bond business is not a revenue generator for the county per se, unless there is a forfeiture.
Okay. So and that's very few cases that are overall forfeited with bonds.
Correct.
Okay.
I would say it's a small percentage. But the incidence of no-shows in courts have increased now that there's no money on the table.
Gotcha. Okay. Now,
Should you be elected again for another term, What are things that you feel are a priority on your list? I know previously you mentioned that your office is switching to Oracle. I don't know if that's a priority, but if you're using an old accounting system, then Oracle has been around for a long time, but it may or may not be an improvement from what you're using.
Oh, it's a vast improvement.
Okay, so I'm assuming that may be because Oracle, I've used Oracle, and Oracle is very good. So is that a priority to get everyone acclimated and understanding how to use Oracle? Is that one of your priorities?
Yes, and I'm on the executive committee that oversees the implementation. Actually, and I misspoke, Oracle is of course, is the programs driving the system. It's actually PeopleSoft,
Okay.
which is used quite extensively both in the private and public sector.
Right.
And so we're spending about $30 to $40 million of taxpayer money to replace what we called IFAS. That was the old accounting system, financial accounting system in Harris County. And so PeopleSoft is coming in. And we've been on this project now probably about 3 years. It started, we've even gone through 2 auditors. We're on our 2nd auditor that's involved on the executive committee that oversees the implementation. So yes, it is a priority. We're going to go live with PeopleSoft on the first pay period of 2019. And so one of the priorities that we have right now is that goes off without a hitch, because if you ever want to have a problem, boy, you send somebody the wrong paycheck or miss their paycheck, everybody, including the commissioners and the press, is going to hear about it. So it's a priority, and we're in the process of training all the department HR individuals on how to make sure that those timesheets are properly uploaded. Then we're going to go to general ledger, then we're going to go to accounts payable, but we're going to phase all the aspects of financial accounting into the PeopleSoft system.
So the first phase, as you mentioned, you have phases. So your first phase will be HR?
Yeah, payroll.
Right. And then after that, you'll phase into AP, AR, and those different areas.
Budgeting, everything
Right.
else, yeah.
Okay.
And why is that so important I know you mentioned that the system is outdated that you currently have. So why is there higher cost associated with maintaining that system versus switching to a new one? Is it actually going to end up saving taxpayers money?
Yeah, and so it's, let me say that IFAS is labor intensive, whereas PeopleSoft will be more digitally inclined, where you don't have to perform as many machinations to get all the data into the system. And of course, the data mining on PeopleSoft is going to be a lot easier. So let's say that the auditor needs to go out and find some information about a particular department. They don't have to physically go down to the department and go through files and whatnot. Hopefully this will be available to them at the stroke of a key or the movement of the mouse, and click, there's the data. So yes, it's supposed to save us a lot of time and labor costs.
Okay.
Okay. Well, as I've said, I think it will. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with IFAS, but
And you don't want to be.
and I don't want to be. Well, I'm sure it'll be an improvement.
One of the things that in your answer to our voters guide, to the League of Women Voters guide, there was a question about unappropriated funds. What is your office doing, or how does the Treasurer's office handle those unappropriated funds?
So I'm not sure what you mean, and I can't recall the statement.
Sure. So the question was, as county treasurer, how will you handle unappropriated funds or funds not immediately needed for the county?
Okay. So as I understood the question was, the county has a big checkbook, right? And so every night we have a balance. That's unappropriated funds. I'm assuming that's what they were talking about. So we may have $30 million at night. We invest that money. We don't just leave it parked in the checkbook for the next day. We invest it. And we invest it according to what's called the Texas Public Funds Investment Act, which tells us how we can invest that money. But we try to generate revenue for the taxpayers. We don't leave that money sitting idle.
Okay. And how does that benefit the county itself? How does that benefit the budget?
Yeah, it's a stream of revenue. So if you're earning, right now we're coming out of a very low interest rate environment. So at one point, banks were paying 25 basis points, and it's gotten a little better because the feds have increased the overnight lending rate, and of course that affects commercial rates. So, but it's a stream of revenue for the county. So if we can make $1 million over the course of a year investing our money overnight, that's $1 million less dollars that we have to go to the taxpayers for important work like paying the sheriffs, operating the jail, maintaining the justice system, maintaining the county morgue, which is, by the way, that's a wonderful operation over there. It's the Harris County Forensics Institute. So we have a lot of expenditures, and anytime we can make a little money here on the side, well, that's a benefit to the taxpayers.
So when you say, I just want to be clear about reinvesting those funds, daily you have funds and you reinvest them. What are you reinvesting these funds in to make additional streams of revenue?
Sometimes we can invest in pools like Tex Pool. Sometimes we invest them in, overnight instruments. Sometimes for the long term, we invest in other municipal bonds. So it has to be in anything that's AAA rated according to the Texas Public Funds Investment Act. So for example, we can't go out and buy Exxon stock. Even though Exxon stock may be doing real well today, oil's closing at almost $75 a barrel, and it would be a great pick in the market, and we could bring in 30% increase for the taxpayers. We can't do that.
Okay.
We can't invest in hedge funds like Orange County did many years ago and lost all their money. So what the state legislature said is you can only invest it in something that's extremely liquid, so that if you need your money the next day, you can get it. Extremely safe. You're not chasing interest. You're really worried about safety. So that's what we invest in. Other bonds, we can buy Israel bonds, but we mostly overnight invest in, a bank rate of return.
So is that you making the decision for the investment, or someone tells you that you may want to invest in this, and that?
So the Public Funds Investment Act says that every county that invests public money has to have an investment policy, a written investment policy, which we do. And then we have to have an investment committee that meets quarterly and, oversees the investments. So, but the actual person that does the investing is what's called a CIO, a county investment officer. They're certified by the state of Texas. We have to sit through an examination. I am a CIO in our county, but the actual investments are done by the Office of Budget and Management in Harris County, which is directed by Bill Jackson, and a lady by the name of Amy Perez, who was a former county treasurer, actually does the overnight investing and long-term investing.
What changes would you like to make, further changes you would like to make to the treasurer's office that would be beneficial to taxpayers? Are there any, or do you feel like you've reached a point where having kept the line on your office budget, that you're as efficient as you can be?
Yeah, well, with respect to the budget, I'm pretty satisfied that we're very efficient, but we're always looking for opportunities to return money to the taxpayer. With respect to the operations of the office, technology is amazing. So, we've gotten everybody away from, let's say, paper checks for payroll a long time ago. Now it's direct deposit. Most of our vendors are paid ACH, the automated clearinghouse system through the banks. Everything is done wire transfer. We still send out thousands of jury checks because they're $6. And I haven't found a system by where I can pay somebody $6 that's cheaper than printing a check, putting it in an envelope, putting a stamp on it, and mailing it to them. But we're always looking to technology to help us improve the efficiency of the office. So I'm assuming that, technology is going to come around where, we eliminate all paper in the county treasurer's office.
Okay. That's a worthy goal. I remember years ago hearing about the paperless office, and it seems the more technical we've gotten, the more paperwork there seems to be laying around everywhere. Nyla, did you have a question?
What would you say to the Democrat that's out there and not sure what they want to do, but they're a Democrat and everyone's telling them to vote Democrat? You're a Republican. What would you say to that Democrat to sway them to your direction?
Well, what I would say to my friends that are Democrats, I grew up in Southwest Houston in a neighborhood called Hiram Clark. I'm of Hispanic descent. And, interestingly, we had an interview, me and my opponent today, who, by the way, is a very fine gentleman. And that question came up. We run with a jersey on. Mine is red. My opponent's is blue. He's with the blue party, the Democrat Party. I'm with the red, the Republican Party. But when we're elected, whether it's me or whether it's Dylan, we should take off our jerseys because then we're the county treasurer. We serve Republicans, we serve Democrats, independents, people that vote, people that don't vote. We serve everybody. And so to my friends out there that are Democrats that know my history, know that I've been in public service for more than 18 years in Houston, know that I've done an impeccable job, they should be confident that I will continue to represent them, that on Inauguration Day, January 2019, I will not be wearing a red Republican shirt. I will be wearing a shirt as Harris County Treasurer and working for them.
Just about a minute or so left, and I thought of another question kind of tied to the budget issues, or the budget that you have in your office. What changes are you able to make in, say, some of the other departments, say the voter registrar's office or the county clerk's office or the district clerk's office, to help rein in or keep the line on their expenses?
So the answer to that, because we're running out of time, is zero. All of the policy set in Harris County is set by the Commissioner's Court. They are the legislative branch of the county, if you will. They approve the budgets, they approve salaries, they approve purchases, they approve contracts, they approve policy. And so we, the treasurer, cannot affect, for example, I can't look at our tax assessor collector and say, you're not spending your money correctly, I'm going to cut your budget. I can't do that. That's up to the commissioners to do. And so, of course, I keep an eye on the checkbook, and hopefully all of the money is being spent accordingly, but I'm not in charge of setting policy for other county officials, and I'm not in charge of setting budgets for other county officials.
Okay, but do you give us some advice on on that?
Can you imagine a politician that doesn't give advice?
And what kind of advice is that? We just got about maybe 15 seconds left. What can you say to the tax assessor collector and say, you need to cut your budget?
So I'll give you an example. Many years ago, the Commissioner's Court approved some questionable financial transactions. I held a press conference and called them out on it because I thought it was my duty to the taxpayers. So, in that press conference, I also gave advice that this is not the way we should do business. We should work under what's the statutes under the Public Funds Investment Act. And but I have a wonderful relationship with the Commissioner's Court, very professional, and I'm not there to call them out. I'm just there to do my job.
Okay, perfect. Well, Orlando Sanchez, he's the current Harris County Treasurer, and he's running for another term in the office. I really appreciate you joining us this evening. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk with the Democratic candidate for Harris County Treasurer, Dylan Osborne. Welcome back. I'm Tim Langford. I'm here with Nyla Shepard. She is my co-host this evening, and we're talking with the candidates for Harris County Treasurer's Office. This is F. Hauer. We have Dylan Osborne, and he is the Democratic candidate for Harris County Treasurer. I do appreciate you joining us this evening.
Absolutely.
I want to start off by asking you to tell us a little bit more about yourself and why voters should choose you on November 6th.
All right. First, I'll start off, I guess, a little bit about me. Actually born and raised in Alabama, but I've been out here in the Houston area for about 10 or 12 years, and I really have grown to love it. This area has really grown on me, and I look to serve the people of this area. A little bit about my background, I guess, is my education is in political science and history. I do have a master's degree in public administration from the University of Houston. Go Cougs. And I'm really just looking to help and try to be helpful, and people think that's a little overly simplified, but I think this office has some opportunities that aren't being realized to allow me just to get out and help the residents and to add some value.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let me ask you something. I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
No.
I'm from Alabama as well.
Oh, okay.
I'm from Mobile.
I am too. Small world.
Wow,
That's great.
Well, that's awesome. So,
That's funny.
you said you wanted to help, and so that is the reason why you decided to run for the treasurer's position, correct? This is your first year.
Yes, this is my first time running, yes.
Okay. So that's a big step for you. So what made you decide you want to help, I want to help, but I haven't decided to run for treasurer?
Okay.
So what about the treasurer's position that made you say, you know what, I think I can really make a difference in this position?
I got you. Well, I've spent about the last 9 years at the City of Houston in a variety of roles. I've worked for a couple of city council members. I've worked for the finance department, and currently I'm in planning and development. So over those last 9 years, I've really just looked for ways to add value. And like I said, just to find spaces to be helpful. And, you know, I'm the kind of guy that stays late to help you pick up the chairs after your party. You know, I like to like I said, just try to help out where I can and find a kind of get in where I fit in. And I looked at these various races that were going on. I said, well, do I want to run for office? And I said, well, let's give it a shot. I think I offer value. And the treasurer's office, like I said, seemed to be underutilized. I think there's a lot of room to grow in that office. And I thought it would just be a great position to see if I am cut out for public service at this level. I don't really have any higher aspirations, but I do see that, like I said, that this really gave me an opportunity to take a position that's not currently being used to its full potential and to offer, like I said, a little extra value. And I keep saying that because I understand the treasurer's office is not the sexiest position to run for. You know, I'm not running for, you know, I'm not Beto. I'm not running for president or governor. I am looking to get in a local office and to really roll up my sleeves and help the residents of Harris County. And I understand that treasurer's office is not going to save the world, but I do think I can help out a little bit to make our slice of the world better.
Well, let me ask you that. What is your vision for what the treasurer's office should be if you were elected?
A lot more community service. Going out to your civic clubs, your HOAs, your super neighborhoods, and explaining the county budget, where your money's going, because I want to make sure that our money is working for our communities. And I'm not so sure that anybody really has those conversations. Here in the area, Houston's the kind of the big driver of the region, and their budget, and granted some little more financial problems there, but they really get all the media attention. Everybody talks about that. But I've been to, I guess, 150 community meetings over the last 7 or 8 years working at the city, and I've never really saw many county people there. And so that tells me two things. Well, one, a lot of those meetings, to be fair, are in the city. Well, why aren't county officials talking to residents in the city? Because they're county taxpayers. We tend to forget that. And I think that people, whether it's the city of Houston, the city of Pasadena, the villages, I mean, all of these different, Galena Park, they need to know where their county money's going because they're paying county taxes too, even if they do more closely identify as a city dweller, an urban dweller. And so I think that as treasurer, they need to be out there talking about these financial issues or just explaining the budget, talking about bond issues and things like that, that isn't always necessarily covered. Now with the big flood bond, everybody was talking about that one. But you don't always see that level of attention paid to county financial issues.
Go ahead.
You can go.
Okay. So speaking of the bond issue, voters approved that $2.5 billion flood bond.
Yes.
If elected, what do you see your office doing to ensure that those dollars are spent wisely and that the taxpayers are getting the full value of the money that's being spent and appropriated?
Well, I think first I have to say that I do not see that my job as treasurer as going out and picking fights with your commissioners or with the county judge. Those are independently elected people, obviously. And I think as treasurer, you go out and say, this is where your money went. This is where we said it would go, but this is where it went, for better or for worse. If you don't like that, you need to take it up with your commissioner. You need to take it up with the county judge, unless it's something just completely outrageous. And then I feel, as any elected official, you have that soapbox to jump up and say, "You've crossed the line. Like this is too much. This is a dumb idea. Whatever." But I think that you go out and you say, this is where we said we were going to spend the money, or we at least gave you some ballpark ideas, and this is where the money went. Now, I will say with the flood stuff, it might be a little bit different, simply because, just because you do a project over here in this watershed, it may benefit people over here. So just if you just print a map of projects, that doesn't tell you the whole story. So it's more nuanced with this one. But somebody needs to go out there and tell you, this is where our checks went. I cut the checks as treasurer, and this is where they went. This is the projects they paid for. I hope that you find that acceptable, but if not, your county commissioner needs to hear from you. The county judge needs to hear from you.
So if you have a situation where you notice that they're trying to spend funds on things that you don't agree with or you don't think should be spent, how would you handle that? I mean, I understand that you're saying they make the decisions and you're kind of just, you review things, I guess you audit things, but if you see something that you don't agree with, how would you handle that?
Well, I think the only thing the treasurer really has at that point is the soapbox, is the bully pulpit. And frankly, with treasurer's office, it's a lot smaller soapbox, right? But there are opportunities to go out, whether it be just a press conference or actually writing op-eds in the Chronicle, or like I said, actually going out and talking to people. I mean, that's what we're supposed to do as elected officials. You're supposed to go out and talk to people. Having a press conference is fine, that's great. Maybe some people see it, a lot of people don't, depending on what time the news covers it, if the news shows up. I mean, you never know. You may have a press conference, you've got one camera. Or you may have a press conference and there's 30 people, or you have no idea. So that's a great start, but you have to go out and talk to people face to face. And you have to do that, frankly, campaigning. You have to do that as an elected official. And like I said earlier, super neighborhoods, HOAs, civic clubs, those are where people are. Those are civically engaged people, or they wouldn't be at a civic club on a Tuesday, Thursday night. So those are people who are engaged and want to know this information. And I understand the limitations of this office and what I'm running for, and that is, no one's going to listen to the county treasurer for 3.5 hours at their civic club. But there's certainly some opportunity there to show up and say, hey, like I said, this is where your money went. This is what we're trying to do. Now, I do think there's another component to that I'd like to mention, which is just more, like I said, community service, in that what's wrong with partnering with nonprofits to offer a financial literacy course. One of the things that I put together when I was working for a city council member in District F, Richard Wynn, we put together a deed restriction workshop. I honestly thought this is a terrible idea. I mean, who's going to show up on a Saturday morning to listen to deed restrictions? Right. We didn't know anything, frankly. I mean, we knew a little bit about deed restrictions, but we weren't experts. So we went out and we partnered with people who were. We brought them in, and in a school cafeteria on a Saturday morning, we filled that cafeteria up. And they sat there for hours asking questions. I said, I never believed this. I had no idea this was going to happen. Who would have thought deed restrictions would get these people fired up? So people want to know this information. And if you go out there, you can partner with these people. And if you're not an expert, and a lot of this stuff, frankly, I'm not an expert, you find someone who is. And you partner with them and say, hey, I'll sponsor this, I'll get the people out, but I need you to teach this particular thing. So that's what you have to do. You find your partners and you go out and you try to help people.
So what brought you to Houston in the first place about a dozen years ago? I mean, it seems like a lot of people that I know are transplants to Houston.
Right.
What drew you here, and what keeps you here?
Well, frankly, a lot of my family had moved out here. And I said, well, I want to go check it out. And frankly, I'm more suited for Houston than I was Alabama. And I love Alabama, but the people there can be a little closed-minded at times. And I said, well, I want to go to the big city. So I came out to Houston, and the people here have been great. The food's obviously wonderful. I like to eat. And you can, especially like in A-Leaf, working in District F, you could go anywhere and get fresh pupusa and then come back and get dim sum. And, it's just this unbelievable smorgasbord of food here. One of my favorite restaurants locally is an Indian restaurant. I never ate Indian food in Alabama. I took my dad a few years ago. He said, man, I've been missing out my whole life. This is the first time I've ever had this. So I very much like the urban environment of Houston, but I also like the people here. The people here have been great, and partially I think that is because there are so many transplants. I mean, so many people in Houston aren't from Houston. I mean, go to any Astros game when we were losing 100 games a season, and you would see that. But luckily, that's not happening anymore.
Yeah. Well, hope for another World Series championship this
Hopefully,
year.
Exactly.
nothing more aggravating than being in a stadium full of Yankees fans.
So you, as a new candidate, you're running against Orlando Sanchez, who has
Yes.
been in this position for a while.
About 12 years, I think, 10 years.
Right. Well, about I think 12. But so why should a voter vote for you, and not just stay with the status quo and stay with him because we've been under him for 12 years or more. I think it's 12 years. He's been involved in politics for a very long time.
Right.
So what about you? Why should I vote for you?
I got you. And I'm certainly not as polished as he is. I'm not a career politician. Like I said earlier, this is my first run. But I think the status quo is just not quite good enough right now. If you're happy with the way things are running right now, by all means, he's your guy. But I think I offer a value. And to use a New Orleans word, lagniappe, just a little something extra. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm approaching this from a different perspective of he is, because this is a largely administrative position. You have a small staff of about 12 people. It's a budget of about $1.2 million. And those people are going to do the nuts and bolts work. I mean, they are. I'm a professional bureaucrat now. That's my trade, and frankly, I'm proud of it. I do the people's business every day. In City Hall, at the City of Houston, on the wall it says, "The people are the city." I still very much believe that, and expand that county-wide, and that we're there to serve. And you have an office of professional public servants who do the nuts and bolts work every day. Checks are going to be cut January 1st, January 2nd of 2019, regardless of who wins. But what else are you going to get? And like I said, I think I'm offering a little more.
And what is that? So what is that offering? Is that just bringing more of the office to the voters?
Absolutely.
But so how does that sort of differentiate you, do you think, from the current administration?
Well, because he doesn't go out to the people at all. I found one thing on this campaign trail, and let me first be clear in that when I criticize my opponent, this is not meant to be a personal attack. He seems to be a very honorable man. I don't really know him that well, but he has to run on his record, and that record right now is just doing the bare minimum. And so going out, like I said, he talks about press conferences and things like that. That's great, but you have to go out and take it to the people. Not everybody has time to sit around and watch the news all night. Not everybody has time to go through and read the paper every day. They are busy. So you need to at least make the effort to get out there. And there's more to it than that, though. It's not just that component. It's also advocacy. Like I said, every elected official has some form of soapbox. He's used it for some things maybe I wouldn't necessarily have addressed. For example, he's really been very critical of Kim Ogg's marijuana diversion program. It's been a wild success and everyone loves it. He also has recently started tackling immigration. Nobody's really frankly cares what the county treasurer says about immigration. I mean, by all means, go after it if you want to, but that's really not in your lane. And I think you do have to kind of carve out a position in your lane, and that's why I talk about things like financial literacy. One issue I think we should be talking about is bank deserts. We talk about food deserts a lot. We don't really talk about bank deserts. Well, look at some place like Midtown, look at Montrose, the Heights, mostly Montrose and the Heights, for example, and there's banks everywhere. Go to 3rd Ward and try and find a bank. Good luck. You can find a check cashing place that wants to charge you, 25% interest on some debit card they've tried to talk you into getting. But those kind of banking options aren't there for everyone that needs them. And as treasurer, you can't just make someone build a bank, but you can go out and advocate for those things. Maybe you can find if you can't get Regions or Wells Fargo or Bank of America, maybe you can get a credit union. Maybe we can expand our county employee credit union. Why not look into that? Maybe we could do a joint effort with the City of Houston's credit union. There's options out there that we need to at least look at and at least talk about these issues that are at least tangibly related to the office.
So you mentioned a lot about going out into the community, speaking to the people in the community and the subdivisions and things of that nature. Are you worried? Because sometimes when you go out like that, you open yourself up.
Absolutely.
And so are you afraid to tackle the tough questions? Because as a treasurer, your role is limited with a lot of things. And so if you're talking to them about a budget and they're asking, why was it spent on this when it should have been spent on that? What would be your answer to the taxpayers?
Like I said, I think it starts with, you got to talk to your commissioner. You got to talk to the county judge. But there is a point where that, they've done something just outrageous that I disagree with on a personal level, and you just have to stand up and say that. This is where your money went. I don't really think this project in particular was a great idea. I think this was a waste of money, or it turned into a boondoggle and a drain of money. There was just a lot of things going on. But, there's got to be your own personal line in the sand, I guess. But once you reach that point and you say, okay, this was something that was just a blatantly dumb idea, or, this ended up not doing what it was supposed to, I think you have to just have the courage to stand up and say that. I'm used to, like I said, working for these council members and going out and having rocks thrown at me, having arrows shot at me. And you just have to stand there and take it. I mean, you wanted to run for office, you wanted to get elected, and you can't hide behind a desk. You got to get out there and talk to people and take that criticism. And like I said, as the treasurer, you go out there and you explain things, and if people don't like it, there's other legislative positions they have to talk to. But there is certainly a limit where you stand up and say, I'm opposed to this, but I had to write the check. That was my job, but I'm telling you now, I think this was a bad idea.
So one of the things that he brought up is that he's been able to keep his budget static over his entire terms. What would you do to ensure that your office is running efficiently as possible?
Well, the first thing everybody now talks about is technology, right? And frankly, I think that's overused sometimes. There's still a lot to be said for a personal touch in a conversation and relationships. But you have to run a mean and lean organization. And working at the city over the last few years, I've certainly learned that. I started at the city basically in 2011 when they had massive cuts and layoffs. And a lot of those folks have come back, but not a lot have. For example, my current department, I'm told, I wasn't there in 2008, but I'm told back then they had about 125 employees. Now we've got about 80 or 85. So I'm very much used to being in an environment where you're running that lean, mean machine. But that being said, and for example, the incumbent brags about his budget didn't grow for 7 or 8 years on his website. His office and the office I'm running for is largely labor. It's a $1.2 million budget with about 10 or 12, 14 employees. You may be spending a little money on office supplies, but all your money's going to labor. So you mean to tell me for 7 or 8 years your employees didn't deserve a raise? You mean to tell me that for 7 or 8 years you didn't give out cost of living adjustments at all? And I don't think it's right to make those political talking points on the backs of your employees. I'm a municipal employee, right? Like obviously I relate to these folks because they are professional public servants in that office and they should be taken care of. That office budget should go up occasionally. That's just the way labor works. That's how the workforce works. And I think to try and make those cheap political points that's not the place for it. So I will be fiscally responsible, but I can guarantee you occasionally I will ask for a budget increase for my employees every 2, 3, 4 years.
Okay, so should you get elected, what is the first thing you would do as soon as you hit the door? Would it be hitting the door and then going out into the streets, or what would be your number one thing or objective that you would want to tackle should you become elected?
Well, actually, I think the number one issue I want to look at from the get-go, once I kind of get comfortable, is where does our division of resources from the county look like? Where do they go based on unincorporated versus incorporated? We talk a lot about the city of Houston, but you got Pasadena, Galena Park, the villages. Do those people get value for their county tax dollars? A lot of these folks identify them first as a city resident, right? But they're still paying county taxes. I live in Montrose. I never see a sheriff come by. I don't have a county library nearby. I don't have a county health facility nearby that I know of. I don't get a lot of county services. And now granted, you don't want to see duplication of services, but we do need to see a relationship between these cities and the county that show that the county is giving value to these residents and at the same time not just overly duplicating services the city already provides. These cities could use the break, frankly, and I think the county owes it to those residents. But so the first thing I want to look at day one is getting in there, learning my employees, and then figuring out some of this information. And maybe it's perfectly working the way it is now, but people at least need to know that.
What do you see as one of the most important duties of the treasurer's office, and how would you carry that duty forward? What would you need to? Do you feel you would need to change things? Would you feel you would need to keep things the same?
Well, I think the number one duty that everyone associates with the county treasurer's office at this point is issuing payments. I mean, you're essentially the payroll system, the vendors, all of that stuff goes through you. People got to be paid on time. That's probably the number one issue. But those duties, like I said, are going to be done the same no matter what, who gets elected. But I think as a professional public servant, as someone who's got the education in this field, I can hit the ground running. I can pick up everything that's going on very quickly, very little on-the-job training, and figure out those systems and make sure that they're working properly, look for improvements. Can we pay people faster? A lot of people have complained about that. Oh, I go to jury duty. Why does it take me so long to get a check? Maybe we can do payment kiosks with debit cards and things like that. There are some innovative solutions we can look at. But number one is making sure those checks go out on time as quickly as possible. People hate to be paid late, especially when you start talking about small businesses. It's one thing if you're doing business with, Schlumberger or somebody like that, right? Exxon. They don't necessarily need your check in 30 days or 60 days. But the subcontractors underneath some of these contractors, for example, on some of these primes, they need their money. They need their money now. They don't have the credit to float, and they don't have, they can't carry this stuff for months and months. They need their checks. So I think you have to get that out as quickly as possible, and government doesn't always pay so quickly.
So I posed a question to Mr. Sanchez.
Mm-hmm.
You're a Democrat.
Proud.
Why would a Republican want to vote for you?
Well, that's a great question, and no one's asked me that on this trail. I've been running for a year now. First of all, this is not a very partisan position, and we elect it partisan, and it's just simply not a whole lot of different ways to pay a check that would be Democrat or Republican, right? There's no progressive way or conservative way to cut a check. But I think when you start looking at advocacy issues and things like that and some of the extra activities I'm talking about, you do see a clear difference. It is the difference between complaining about a marijuana diversion program and fighting to end bank deserts. And while on a Republican level that may not be the biggest priority, I'm not talking about any issues that negatively go against the Republican platform. We're not talking about the big social issues that everybody talks about right now because it just has nothing to do with the office. You don't want to get out, there's no reason to get out there and talk about, President Trump, for example. Everybody wants to talk about that right now. That doesn't have anything to do with the office. This office is an administrative office, and I can promise those Republicans that I will run this office, responsibly, transparently, and there is no Democratic or Republican way to do that.
You mentioned you mentioned bank deserts a couple of times. Mm-hmm. What I think we all know what constitutes a food desert, and those are very concerning because people don't have access to fresh foods,
right,
where they can spend their money wisely, not spending on fast food or microwaved food or anything like that. Mm-hmm. How would you nudge some of the banks that are located here in Houston to open up branches or find ways to service that community so that they didn't have to rely on payday loans or the check cashers?
Well, I think you have to be innovative, first of all. But there's always a carrot and a stick approach, right? First, you try to work with them to maybe get them a tax break, or at the city, for example, they use 380 agreements where the company puts up money and pays for infrastructure improvements around the property, but the city pays it back through tax breaks. So it's not a true tax break in the normal sense, but it gets the infrastructure in place. It's looking at things like that. Are there ways that we can entice these folks to come into these communities? And if not, maybe we need to shame them. Maybe we need to put it out there. We're trying to get this bank in here and they're just not playing ball. But it starts with relationships. You've got to develop relationships with these folks. And that's how this kind of business gets done. So you've got to be able to go out, meet these people, at least be friendly or, personable with them, and go out and try to cajole them, beg, plead, and finally, like I said, maybe shame. But you have to use every tool in your arsenal. And that may be a tax break on one side, or it may be just a partnership with various landowners, or bringing people together to work this out together. I just think there's opportunities there, and maybe I can't get a bank in, say, Third Ward. Totally possible, plausible. I just can't make that happen. We at least need to have the conversation, and that's a step in the right direction. And right now, we're not even talking about it.
So, what do you say to the voter out there that's like, well, I'm not sure if I want to vote for him because he seems really nice guy, but I don't know if he can really get in there and do what I think he should do. What that means, a lot of people may or may not know, but
right.
So what do you say to that voter that's like, yeah, he's nice, but I'm not sure?
Well, the first thing I say to that voter is make sure you vote. We've got to get our turnout up, and not just Harris County, all over the country. We've got to make voting more of a habit for folks. So that would be number one. You got to get to the polls. Number two is, like I said, the incumbent has to run on his record. I don't have to do that. All I can point to is this is what I want to do, and this is my experience and background and education that shows that I can do those things. I can't prove it to you till you get me in office. So I would tell that voter, this is what I'm offering. I'm offering increased visibility, transparency. I'm offering you an ally. I'm offering you an advocate. And this is my background. I've worked for city council. I've put together these community meetings. I've attended, hundreds of them. I've got my master's in public administration. I've got my experience at the city. I can do these things I've said. And you have to, at that point, trust me, because I can't prove it until I'm in there. But I've got the background, I've got the experience, and I've got the vision that I think would improve things.
Okay.
Just in a couple of minutes that we have left, tell me what would you want anyone but yourself, say some other office members, to be involved, other employees in the treasurer's office be involved in making this outreach to the community, and what would that look like, or would that be something that you would do just yourself?
Right. Largely, I'm planning on doing a lot of it myself, simply because I am not looking to increase a huge increase in FTE counts, employees. There is a fairly limited budget, and people don't expect you to keep a lean budget. So you can't just bring in frivolous employees to make my job easier. So a lot of that is going to be on me, and I've got the background and experience to do it. It's certainly easy enough to put together a community meeting. The hard part's getting people there. But it's easy enough to find a venue and put together a program and an agenda. What I'm suggesting is not rocket science. I can do this myself, and I'm not afraid to roll up my sleeves and do it. I very much have a blue collar attitude. I'm not your standard politician. I don't wear fancy suits and I don't drive a fancy car. I'm very much, actually before I got started in public service, I managed an auto parts store. And I still kind of have that like I said, blue collar attitude, roll up your sleeves and get in there and do the work. I'm not a flashy guy. I don't mind doing the work myself. I'm not too proud. And you go out and you find partnerships with people who are interested in helping. There's tons of people across this region who love helping, who want to be involved, who want to help the community. You just have to find those people and build relationships with them.
And what would those kind of partnerships look like with, say, some nonprofits? What would their role be in financial literacy, for one instance?
Right. So it's finding those nonprofits that are interested, whether it be maybe a women's shelter that might need some help with programming, or maybe it's a after-school program. My favorite charity, and I haven't talked to them, so maybe they're not interested in this at all, but one of my favorite charities is Workshop Houston in 3rd Ward. I would love to go over there and talk to young folks about this stuff. And like I said, maybe I need to find a partner. Maybe I need to go find a grad student from TSU or U of H at the Bauer School and take them over here and say, let's explain to these folks what credit card interest actually looks like. It's real easy when you're 18 or 20, to get a high interest credit card and quickly get in trouble. You don't have the perspective yet. So I think that it's important to go out there and talk about those kinds of issues at the level these folks are at. Whether you're talking to 17-year-old high schoolers, talking to college students, and maybe you need to have a little bit more advanced class for single moms. But you need to go out there and find those partners. And nonprofit world is obviously the first place you'd look. Schools would be another.
Okay. Well, that's about wraps up our time this evening. Dylan Osborne is the Democratic candidate for Harris County Treasurer. I do appreciate you joining us this evening. A reminder that early voting begins in Harris County on October 22nd and it ends on November 2nd. And Election Day is Tuesday, November 1st. League of Women Voters encourages you to go to the polls either early or on Election Day. If you have not registered yet to vote, you still have a few more days to do so. The voter registration deadline is next Tuesday, October 9th, so be aware of that. And I want to thank my co-host tonight, Nyla Shepard, for joining me at this hour with conversations with the candidates. And have a great night.
Thank you.